Sunday, June the 14th, 2026, number 5098 was posted to the Anachronisms blog by me. That was just 4 days ago, I guess. This is Delray Cross. These are poems from a long project. I've written over 5,100 of them, and I've been recording each of them to put into the blog where the project resides. It's called Diminutive Derivative, and this is a longer one. I was talking earlier in another recording about how during the pandemic I was writing longer poems for a while, and I started out the project really concentrating on, okay, these are going to be short pieces, which is what I generally write anyway, like would be under a page, say, of 8.5 by 11 typewritten. Many times much shorter than that. I like to write like sonnets, or I've written a lot of one-line poems, it turns out. But this one's a little longer. I suppose one way to put it might be that I'm quite financially unsolvable. Unresolvable, unresolved. I used to invest almost in an unbeknownst fashion. We called it 401k. Or that might have been a brand for a pair of pants that when I was much more financially solvable, I used to wear on occasion. I'm a hard fit. My legs a tad too short for most standardized fits. But at least I'm in the States rather than in Europe, where everyone is apparently a teeny weeny skinny mini. I could take a too long pair up a few inches. It's true. I had an internship during the year I earned my last degree, in which I taught young students interested in the dramatic arts how to sew. Then we built costumes at shop before each play. Then I managed the house during each performance, also an internship. And in the various theaters we had on my grad school campus that year, there were no less than 10 full-fledged theatrical productions. Like most years, for most of my life, it was a pretty busy year, and income was pretty sparse, also like most years of my life, not all. Despite 3 internships, the third was for a campus drug and alcohol rehab counselor, and 20 to 30 hours per week at the local Big Lots. So I'm a bit short, but if push comes to shove, I could take a pair of jeans or slacks up to my 28 or so inseam, maybe 29, should there not be any of what they call abnormal sizes available. Like I said, I'm something around a 28.5 inseam, and it's usually hard to find anything less than a 30 inseam. Some jeans have sizes that are shorter than 30, like Levi's, which I know because I grew up wearing 501s. No wonder the subject got off course when I mentioned I once had a 501k. Not being employed at the moment, and having long ago gotten rid of my 401k money in the decade of destitution that I am still riding out just as penniless as ever, not only do I owe taxes, at least in the state of California now, with no income in over a year and a half at present, but to various small credit cards that I had used to build up my credit ever since I could afford to, when card companies began to give me a little credit once again. This is a game that isn't fun. So let's change the subject. I'm a non-solvent human looking for a job, having just days ago turned 59 years old, which sounds like a practically unsolvable logic problem, especially if I were to continue to add on pieces and parts of my issues at hand, my ongoing problems, my tragedies, my downright tragedies that have kept me from my betrothed. My betrothed. I do have one of those, and I'm quite rightly giddy about the notion. The only problem is that he lives in the southern hemisphere and is attending school, and I live in the northern hemisphere, and while we've taken care of the paperwork to get him here, we've been unable to pay for said paperwork. The visa that would have him here and ready to marry me within 90 days upon his arrival, even though we talk every day, often several times, live, and chat intermittently in order to make the visa part happen so that he can come here, I saved up because it is required that I visit him in real life before I send the visa, which I completed. After mandatorily going down to visit him in person a year ago March for a couple of weeks. And it's been 6.5 years that we have thusly become betrothed, pretty much. It's a notion that I used to make fun of when friends of mine got into long-distance partnerships or of romantic and or commitment and or sexual natures. The top 3 I mean, sure, you can have one, you can have a couple, but to find someone in which you are able to work out all three seems, to me, that ideal. Like you have something really worth working on, keeping going. And I've not exactly been wise with commitments, but I've had a lot of them. And many of those have been from 3 months to 10 years or so in duration, which means I have what they call, like I said, experience. The same thing that if you were to look at my professional or paid employment resume, you'd see that some pretty good experience is something I have also plenty of in the career I happenstanced into and have been relatively happy with for most of my life. One would think that things might, considering a pretty decent amount of experience with each, be able to procure both reliable and purposeful employment along with a more personal relationship, a small family at which to spend the rest of our lives. But as of this writing and several years of working quite intensely to get at least a good part of what I had going, or me, for me, for many years back, up to many years back, one would be sadly mistaken as I had to deal with a ridiculously cowardly breakup from someone with whom I'd lived and loved as a boyfriend, partner, romantic and otherwise. In other words, it was the perfect setup for one of those special ones that had all three of those things we mentioned earlier. This supposedly aware individual, me, who was in love and a commitment and had wonderful intimacy for 10 years with this individual, or thought he did, got hoodwinked into dealing with his all but actual death, so possibly worse than death. The death of a very long-standing intimate partner who just disappeared without even a warning after 11 years or so. So that he could and would marry someone for whom he'd apparently been hot for and spent such intimate time with during 80% of the long duration of time that we were together in a supposed committed relationship. This all sounds pretty normal, I suppose, except for the extreme cowardice he displayed by leaving me to grieve like he had literally died in my world. A death that I didn't get literal, but in all ways but. I had to spend valuable and very ill, thanks to the loss, time dealing with the fact that not only was our relationship fraudulent for the most part, transpiring through what at the time seemed and still feels like were the best years of my life, only to finally have him disappear with no warning in that horrifying way of cowardly not even giving me an explanation or even one word that he was going to leave, and I would never see or hear from him again. In other words, I became a widow. He was my dead former spouse. But the voices of dying spouses live on in the ears and minds of those they've left behind, don't they? And this has been a meandering story in which I have now vulnerably relayed to you that at 59 years of age, that is, at an age when most people begin to at least think in earnest of how they will wind down, should they have such luxury, I unfortunately have a need rather to wind up, and of getting the love I currently have who lives on the other side of the world to me, or working with him to do so. That's what I say. Or work with him to find a way to get us reasonably and contentedly together for a life that is real, that includes the both of us working together on more than, say, a couple of video conferences and intermittent texts throughout the day, to get the chance for regular and real touch, living at least the best way we can come up with the intimacy we want in real and meaningful ways. Rather than having only 2 weeks out of 6.5 years in each other's company, we can have all but maybe 2 weeks of the year in each other's company, or more. Again, I'm writing this as a means of relaying, of understanding what I need by articulating myself, of using you as a meaningful means for me, and also as a means to figure out how to edit this thing because it needs to be edited. So sorry about that. By casually giving you a bit of the things I find important in my story, why it's important I do this, we can talk about some other time, but it truly can be good for me. That's what is on my mind and why I have said what I said here on these virtual pages. And so I am appreciative of being able to do this, of you being there, whether or not you are, and of using this as a means, in this case, like a diary or a therapist, or writing at a poem. And no, this is not my only way to write. It is just one. Thank you so much. Perhaps knowing a few things about me might be a good thing for you, I cannot say, but passing what I have along to you about me has definitely been good for me. In understanding better what is happening in my life and preparing for a hopeful, adventurous future with a person with which I desire to do so, with whom I desire to do so, and in helping to instill within me, by talking about it realistically, some helpful goals during the process and the motivation to do my part to make these goals happen. And also, it's a means of building community. I like to hope to think, I don't know, like my magazine did that anyway. This maybe not so much, but I know people. There must be someone out there that's reading this, given the statistics that I get. Anyway, that's a lot of help. So please accept my most humble appreciation at your participation in what has been a bit of a vulnerable and potentially helpful exercise by me, and pardon the problems in grammar and in me just pausing just to figure out what the heck I was saying during this unfortunately rather long poem. I don't usually like to write these longer poems, and I always like to think that they're kind of inferior to my normal size. I like to write short. I'm better at short poems, I think, but sometimes they go on. Thank you so much.